Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone can hear me. Um, Welcome to this afternoon's skill share session on exploring how power, policy, and personal brand intersect in shaping inclusive workplaces where all individuals, regardless of gender, can thrive, and obviously very topical with it being Women's Month. So joining me as usual is Brad, who will be hosting the session and kind of leading discussions and so on. And we joined this afternoon by Caireen Hains, who is a part of our executive committee and a leader in terms of the industry, running a business integral in the metal and engineering industry as well. Brad, are you there? Are you with us?
Yeah, brother, I'm here.
Perfect. If I can hand over to you, Brad, then yeah, let's get going.
Yeah, we're going to jump straight into it because we've got actually quite a bit to talk about. And I know that Caireen and I have been chatting a little bit offline, but we started having such an awesome conversation. I felt like we had to stop and pick it up here. And Gordon, I believe you're joining us this time for the conversation.
I'll try where I can.
Where you can fit in. So joining us today, like I mentioned, is Caireen, and Caireen is the managing director of Xenogen Industrial Knives and Blades. And I did a little bit of a background check, and it sounds like a pretty dynamic business. Caireen, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Brad.
Cool. So, yeah, it sounds quite impressive. I had a look at your online presence, and you guys seem to have your stuff together there.
We're trying.
we try. So I want to jump straight in and I want to ask a question, a weird question, right? And I've shared screen on my talking points because I kind of wanted to be transparent on where we're going. Are men difficult to work with? Caireen, come on, share it. I want to know.
I think everybody has their days. So yes and no, it's yes and no. Definitely. We all have our days and we're all difficult to work with. So
but
reality,
that's the point, right?
Yeah.
That's the point. I think that this idea of creating an inclusive workplace and we don't make it gender specific is actually a positive step forward because yes, we as men might say, oh, but women are difficult to work with. They're so emotional. But I think if Nicole knows me well enough, she knows I'm hyper emotional because I'm hyper creative. So I think a general neutral workplace that has policy that really pushes the business forward, especially in an industry we're in, is absolutely vital. So as MD yourself, what policies have you put into place? What has worked for you? Share some golden nuggets.
I think, Brad, it's policy is one thing. So you can have all these policies, but it's about the implementation of them. It's about the actioning of it, and it's about, getting down to people. So I think for me, we don't have gender-based policies or something that says we're not going to recruit based on certain specifics. I think what goes on in the workplace is about informing. It's about teaching. I think those are the policies that are very important. And I suppose, there's so many barriers, and these barriers are kind of, for me, the things that we've got to make sure that, if you create a policy, it's no use having it where you've got all these barriers that you haven't identified or looked at.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the barriers, so Brad can come up with a great policy for his business that works well with ChatGPT and it looks and it's designed beautifully. But if I haven't factored in that not only am I dealing with perhaps potential issues around gender, I'm also dealing with different cultures, etc. And I haven't even factored any of that in. But Gordon, I mean, in your business, is it ego driven? Are you an ego dude?
Gee, I hope not. I think for me it's it's an interesting question for me, Brad, because like I said, I hope not, but I think what really needs to be paid attention to is kind of just to be mindful about how others perceive you. whether it's a question
Makes
of
sense.
gender, or whether it's a question of ethnicity, or whether it's a question of whatever culture, whatever the case may be. Now, what I think is really important to bear in mind is how others perceive you, and always just to keep an open mind in terms of how you see the world will be inevitably different from how others see the world, whether it's your own employees, whether it's business partners that you interact with, customers, suppliers, etc. And that, I think, if you have a good sort of approach to that and you bear that in mind, I think it certainly gives you sort of a certain amount of grounding in terms of not being kind of too one-minded or single-minded in your approach, which I think is really important, and that then encourages inclusivity and that type of thing.
Yeah, because we might have a bigger opinion on ourselves to say, for example, we are very fair and consistent. But meanwhile, we're micromanaging our teams. And we're micromanaging our teams because we don't have the right policies at work. Yes, we've got policies in place, but we as business owners are actually not even following our own policies. As MDs and as leaders of the company, we might not even be following the policies. And like Shrey commented, fit for purpose. Is it just a tick box exercise, or are we really creating policy that can take the business forward? But Caireen, tell us, being an MD and being a woman, are you often perceived as kind of Iron Lady? Because if you're a guy and you're in a leadership position like an MD, you are hailed as a leader, as the power guy. But it's not always the same for a woman, right?
No, definitely not. And I think yes, I am, but at the same time, there is something that is with male-dominated industry that says, but you're a woman, what do you know about engineering? What do you know about steel? So there has been that. And I think the difficulty has been in working at trying to change that mindset that people have. Luckily enough, I have years of experience, so you can throw that into the mold, But it is, yes, you are the Iron Maiden, or what is it that you actually know? Do you know anything? But I guess that's what's helped push the idea of how important it is to inform, educate, give people information, because I think because of these diverse cultures that we have. That's where people don't, that we're not equipped with enough information. So when I'm making a policy about something that's regarding, gender neutrality or whatever, if I'm not informed about what it means for all the other cultures or all the other genders, how is that policy going to be successful? And the problem is I don't believe that as leaders we are informed enough as to the impact of what our policy says on people in the workplace, on inclusivity.
Because we have example after example after example of how women have really excelled in leadership positions. So I'm a little bit boggled, and Gordon, maybe this is for you. Why do we feel that women don't know in this industry? What do you know? Why does that exist? Why does it still exist? Is it lack of policy, or is it just maybe instead of trying to, persuade someone to change their thinking, let's just replace the person that's thinking that? What is the situation there?
Yeah, that's a great question. My sort of experience is very much what Caireen shared, where if it just, I think historically with the industry being male dominated, when women, particularly in positions of leadership, are encountered, then it's almost like there's an extra hurdle for them to overcome to demonstrate that, well, I deserve to be here, before one might even be open, sort of openly sort of receive them and that type of thing. So which is which wouldn't be true of their male counterparts necessarily, but and that's why I think it's very important that that one approaches this whole situation with an open mind, not just with respect to gender, but certainly with respect to gender, and be mindful of the fact that people will come with great experience and great expertise, etc., from all walks of life, and not to create these unnecessary sort of barriers that one tends to create. And I think it's just historical. I'm not sure, if there's really much more to it than that, but nevertheless, not to downplay the importance of overcoming those. Those
Yeah,
hurdles,
I just think it's absolutely crazy that based on your gender, you've been given an extra hurdle or an extra, that little bit of more that you've got to, and like Shreya was saying in the conversation on chat, that, sometimes women have to show up even more masculine, because being feminine in a male-dominated environment and holding a senior position, it's just kind of this recipe for disaster, where you actually can't implement policy because people just don't take you seriously. Caireen, is there a shift happening? I mean, you're obviously a trailblazer. You look like you don't take any nonsense. I love that about you. We've chatted a bit, but I also believe you come across as that ability to look at a situation with almost that mother effect of being able to see things from all the different perspectives and then making a conclusive decision. Us men, we generally show up with a lot of ego and we make decisions based on that. When you create a policy, when it talks to gender neutrality in the workplace, do you consider how we all show up and try and create a neutral policy that we can all actually adhere to? Or are these policies just impossible?
No, they're not impossible, but I think you've got to understand what the end goal is and work backwards sometimes. And I mean, for me, like, for example, leaders who understand intersectionality, how gender, race, class, and other identities overlap, are better equipped to create equitable policies, and that's, for me, taking a step back and saying, okay, what is it I want to achieve at the end of the day? And where does policy fit in? Because for me, I want to employ the best person for the job. So what at the end is more is the importance of it all. I don't really mind, I don't really care, for lack of a better word, what your gender, age, sex, race, religion is. I just want somebody to do the job. So where does policy come in around saying, okay, that's really what we want to find? So now looking back at gender and all, race, age, and all these other sort of sections, how does that fit? I'm not going to allow it to affect my policy. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I just find it, so a little bit on my side, I kind of grew up single mom household. So, and my mom's runs a big business. So I've seen a woman in power, and I've seen that she's been termed, they actually call her Ma Baker after those gangsters from the 20s, the lady so that's her nickname, is Ma Baker. So when she pulls into the different premises she goes to, on the announcements, they say Ma Baker, then they know they have to. And I just think it's so sad that you can't see the beauty of the success behind the person because you're so preoccupied about what the person looks like. And I do understand we have to be cognizant around race and we have to be cognizant around gender because we do show up differently. But the policy actually helps, if I understand correctly, kind of dub that down a little bit and make us look at things from a more kind of logic perspective than an emotional perspective. But what research have you experienced or you've undertaken or you've read through, Caireen, that helps us understand the importance of policy when it comes to gender?
Steve, Brad, for me, it doesn't. I don't think that it is something that has really stood out in my business that I can say my policy is more about discrimination. My policy is more a generalized sort of thing about that and about enhancing people for their strengths that they bring to the business. It's more about the job. It's more about what they can do. It's more about celebrating them being successful in their strengths, coming forward within the work that they do. So I don't really, it's not something that I have focused on, but I guess I'm not that woman who feels that I've had the need to go and show that I've proved everybody wrong. That's never been something in the back of my mind. So maybe that's influenced me not going into it, to look at, to say, okay, we need to have policy regarding this.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where the problem comes in, is you have leaders who don't know what policy to develop because they don't understand. They're not able to create that equitable policy because they don't understand, or they're not in touch with what is actually going on in certain environments.
Yeah. I honestly, sometimes we don't know how to solve the problem because we are the problem. So as leaders and as influential position holders in a company, we are showing up with masculinity. We mansplaining everything every 5 minutes, and we constantly pushing our position because we have issues that we are arriving to the workplace with. We have insecurities as men showing up. Gordon, as SAEFA, what could we do? Because we've kind of picked up on something. Is it not something that we can do where we have a workshop where we talk through policy? I mean, I know Shrey is very big on this and has mentioned this before when it came to other items and other types of policies we can have in place. But, you know, that was regarding artificial intelligence. But now we're talking about gender and gender neutrality in a business and being able to see a person for what they bring to the table, not whether they're wearing a skirt or a trouser or a this or a that. Is SAEFA coming up with something? Do you think this is something we could explore?
I think you know, because I like what you guys were both saying and talking about. I think that from a company policy perspective, and certainly, I mean, I think, you know, it's very easy to fall into the trap of saying, well, okay, we need a policy on this or we need a policy on that. It almost becomes like a tick box exercise. So let's get a policy in place. Once it's in place, then it's in place. And the problem with that kind of thinking is that you run the risk of rushing the policy in a sense of you know, getting in place, not really being all that mindful in terms of the practicality, and maybe more importantly, how you're going to live the policy, or perhaps, you know, sort of better expressed, not live the policy. So, you know, it's a case of saying, for me, you know, these policies that one puts in place really need to be properly thought out, properly discussed, exactly. Yeah, there's enough input from enough people from different, you know, backgrounds and whatever the case may be. And then, you know, what I think is very often missed, and it's, you know, it's not a criticism, it's just part of everyday life. You've got 1,000,001 things to do every day, particularly if you're running a business. It's easy to fall into the trap of, okay, well, we've ticked that you know, that box and that's done, so now we can forget about it. But what we don't kind of bear in mind is that, you know, employees are guided by policy. We've got to live those policies. We've got to show by, you know, lead by example, and really show that these policies are in place for a reason other than just to tick the box. But, you know, this is why we have, for example, this particular policy on recruitment, and this is what we're going to be doing, and this is what's going to be guiding us. And not only are we going to, you know, enforce the policy, but we're going to follow it ourselves as leaders, you know, particularly in terms of the directorship of the company and the owners of the businesses and that type of thing. I think that's crucial. And just that mindset shift, I think, makes a massive difference. Just that mindfulness about, you know, when we're drafting this policy, are we going to do a proper job? Because we want something that's going to guide us. I mean, at the end of the day, you want a policy that's going to be followed for a reason. And when that policy is followed, everything should then slot nicely into place. And of course, you know, that's not to say policies can't evolve and be adapted from time to time and that type of thing. But you don't want to put a policy in place which is then not followed, because that's useless. In fact, it's worse than useless. Your employees will look at that and say, well, not only, you know, does the company leadership not follow the policies, but obviously these things aren't well thought out because nobody's following them, and, you know, they don't serve a purpose, etc. So that's a critical, I think, often mislink, if I can put it like that, and understandably so, because, you know, we all understand that we've got 1,000,001 different things to do every day.
Yeah. But I think that million and one things is definitely influenced by the policy we keep.
Mm.
The big thing is I feel like sometimes, we create these policies to almost protect this kind of situation that we're facing, where in an industry we are seeing women really having to jump an extra hurdle just to do something that there's no other reason why they cannot be great at that. And I think the policy helps kind of even the playing field. So sometimes the lack of policy also allows things like this to happen. But Caireen, I want to ask you a question around your personal brand, because you kind of show up in a certain way. I want to ask around, do you believe that, like, are you an inspiration to other women and other men? When you step up and you come into the workplace, do you see yourself as that, or are you just that kind of person, like, let me just roll up my sleeves and get on with it?
I think, Brad, at the beginning, I think it was a case of roll up your sleeves and you just get in, and I think that because we've been through such a difficult time, with business in the last 20 years, that's what you kind of had to do. And I think over the time, I've started to realize that my interaction and the way I look, the way I talk to employees, the way I have discussions with them, I can start to see that there are those influences that are coming through. And it's shown in terms of employees starting to talk, well, not starting, but talking to me, more engagement from them, more buy-in from them. And I think it also is about me talking directly to them. So it's not policy that's put up on the board. It's something that is seen. There's
It's
action
relatable
behind the policy. And that's where it makes a very big difference, is the interaction that one has. So for me, it's I wish you could go and get by the policy, right? And you could say, okay, here's the ground rules for the policy, and I'm just going to adapt this because this is what I believe or whatever, and we can implement it. Because that work of doing policies, procedures, etc., is mind-blowing. So for me, that's where HR comes into it, and there's such an important role to play in that. And they help you then also do this personal branding. So you're almost actually doing company branding. So what your company brand stands for internally, and that's where all those policies go into. And then that is aligned then with your personal branding.
Okay, and then that aligns with the potential customer you're trying to target.
Well, it aligns with trying to retain employees. It aligns with trying to keep employees that you want to.
Fair enough, yeah.
It aligns with trying to have this, this is such a nuanced question that, power policy and personal branding, and you want to have an inclusive workforce because I know what it's like to be a number. I've worked in a company before where I was a number, and it's not cool. It's not nice, and I don't want my employees to ever feel they're a number. We must have this inclusive workforce. So my personal branding, it's important. I never thought it was, but I suppose because I was always the doer who just got in and did, and I never looked at it through maybe more mature leadership, managerial roles.
And I think this is where authenticity comes in, because as a leader, if you know that you're not the right policy creator, that as the head of the company, you shouldn't actually be creating the policy. It should be, I think that's what you touched on, right? Must be your HR.
Yes. Well, somebody, and that's why I think it's also, we have these people and leaders who create these policies and they don't understand it, but it's kind of a forceful thing of what they think should be without this inclusion of what the company brand should be or what they want their business to look like. So it's kind of maybe a one-sided or a one opinionated kind of creation of a policy instead of it being from, a perspective of HR. So
yeah, and I feel like as a leader, sometimes you create that policy in the wrong mind space. You're doing it because you're angry nobody pitched for the meeting, so suddenly you throw a policy together, everybody must be there a few minutes before. Or you get upset because somebody didn't kind of respond to you in a certain time, so you create a policy to get that in place. And I think we've all been there as humans. That's how we've reacted. We've hidden behind the policy to help us kind of scratch our egos a little bit. So that is why I think if we take it away from the leadership, the top leadership, and give it to almost a neutral party, somebody who's experiencing leadership to actually draft the policy, that could be quite an interesting process. Is policy done by committee? Is it a camel or is it a horse? Do we streamline it? Do we elect 1 or 2 people to work on our policies, or do we get the whole, mid-range company in, mid-level company in, and have a session on a Saturday or a Friday to say, okay, look, we're going to talk about policy. What is our approach? How do we actually start this process?
That's why I said, Brad, you've got to have something where there is a template that you can then say, okay, because when you look at policy, I mean, even, encouraging people to do policy with AI, that's great. It's really great. But
is it great though?
But does it fit your business? And how much detail are you going to go into? I would far rather have somebody on a machine being more productive than being part of a policy an inclusion policy decision making, where the policy, like Shrey said, is how important is it and what is the reason for it. I'd rather be working on a policy that creates a policy of a standard to work to on a specific machine or in a specific area of my business than sitting worrying about an inclusion policy. But it's because I'm already inclusive. So how do you start off with somebody, that's, for me, it's educating and informing. But there's a buy-in that I suppose maybe from long ages ago when I did studies, that human resources is a vitally important thing in the organization. And this is why. It's not for the leader to do the policy themselves, I don't believe. But there are many people that do. We are to sign off on it and we are to say, right, how are we going to get everybody to buy in on it? But I certainly don't have the time to write one.
Yeah. So your suggestion is to reach out and get support, bring an external person in that's got the speciality around that is able to understand the development of policy. But it's not just about writing a note on a Word document and sticking it on the back of a toilet door. It's kind of how, like Shreya was saying, answering all these questions. But something I want to ask that's, I don't know if it's going to be controversial or not, but I want to ask it in any way. Because we've now realized that women have an extra hurdle to kind of jump over, generally, okay? We're not going to change that overnight. And I know that when people give advice to women, it's stand your ground and do all of those things. But how do you navigate the male ego? You clearly meet it often. It's something you meet regularly at conferences. It's probably something you meet in your workplace when you're negotiating with clients or suppliers. Caireen, how do you deal with the male ego, the phenomenon?
Oh, a famous psychologist once said to me, you have to kind of go in as if you don't know, you've got to change your tactics. It's like a salesman. If you want to sell something, you've got to go try a different approach. And I think that's what it is about, is learning to read people. Body language is very important. And I think also going in with humility. There's something said for, going in being all bashful and opposing straight away. I think to have an inquiring mind. And, my mother used to say, zip your lip and wear beige and listen. So there's some things with regards to that as well, is you can't always go in pick your battles wisely. You can't always go in guns blazing, and I don't think you find solutions like that. I think solutions are found through communication, through questioning, through informing. There's so much more positive stuff, to me. I would love to be able to say to people that I would love to be part of my policy sort of group. You give an hour of your Saturday and I'll pay you for an hour, but let's create something great that everybody's got to buy in or whatever. And you brainstorm it. There's such power in that. And that's where this inclusivity comes in, is using that power And in whatever you do, approaching, I mean, I've had probably more difficult ladies that I've had to deal with than with some men, you know. So for me, yeah, gender, it's another story. But I guess I'm also kind of used to it. Being in the industry for 28 years is something that, you know, maybe you just become numb to it, or you choose to ignore it because it's not something that's important. But people starting out, I think, you know, not only gender, race, you know, all those, it's all to me in the same bundle. Yes, it's Women's Month, but I think it's just falls in the same group.
Yeah, it's just an interlude to this kind of melting pot of a whole lot of different things. But I think authenticity does also contribute to meeting someone halfway. I think if you show up in yourself, and that's why the personal branding for me was quite important, because if you have your personal brand set, you have your value system in place, and it's relatable, and you show up authentically, I think that does help. Hey, Gordon, do you deal with difficult leaders? The male ego. You're a dude, but how do you deal with the male ego?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's definitely, you know, I think that the way to approach it is to not to struggling with the kind of the right wording, but it's difficult to come up with a formula that'll work for everybody. You know, it's, in my experience, I think what served me well, let me put it like that, and obviously people will have different approaches and tactics, is to say, well, you know, if you genuinely listen to people and you really want to sort of engage with them and help them with the issues or whatever the case may be, then you know, as long as you show that willingness to understand and that willingness to put in the hard yards and work to try and assist people and work with them, solve their problem, whatever it is that may be the case, then generally I think you get a positive response. I mean, you will get, you know, people that might be more dictatorial in terms of their approach. Well, this is how I want it done, etc. But if you can show them that, well, you know, I understand that, and this is why I think that this may not work, and so on, you know, then you can generally work around that. But that comes with you know, really sort of a passion for what you do, and really wanting to engage with the work rather than be too sidetracked with the ego or the type of personality or whatever that you're dealing with, you know. So I think it aligns with what Caireen was saying, in that you got to look past kind of the outside appearance of the person, whether it's gender, race, personality, whatever the case may be, and kind of get to the crux of the issue and say, okay, guys, let's engage on that. And that's really why I think, you know, the hard yards are done, and you know, the connection can be made, if I, you know, as it were.
Yeah, Caireen, do you agree with that? 100%, eh? Cool.
Yeah, sorry, yes, definitely. It's a minefield.
Minefield. But does gender, you know, a gender equal policy or policy that pushes gender equality, does that equal productivity in a workplace?
Definitely
does it guarantee I'm going to have a Smurf village where everybody knows what they're doing?
That's what I said from the onset. You know, this policy doesn't have anything to do with productivity. I think the influence comes in as if you have an issue with gender equality that affects someone's performance or their productivity. Yes, definitely. But I think if it's there, and that, I think, yeah, it doesn't. For somebody who believes in your policy, it won't make them more productive or less productive. That's up to them, you know.
Yeah, so it's an individual thing up and above the policy, right?
Mm.
Yeah, fantastic. Take us through COVID and steel price hikes. Share a little bit of your struggle with us. Was it tough? Rough?
I won't lie to you. I never, ever want to experience anything like that in my life again, ever. It was the most traumatic time. Just the work environment and being safe, having children, having to work 10-hour shifts, there's still unloading shipments. It was very traumatic, extremely traumatic. Yeah, don't want to do that again anytime in my lifetime.
So you know, we've got a few minutes left. We've got about 20 minutes left on the session, but I want to talk through, you know, the audience that's sitting in the room today. We've spoken through, you know, this kind of gender neutral policies that we want to create, and how important they are, and how important it is for us as leaders not to be the authors of those policies, but rather be the endorsees and push that through into the workplace. And I think we also spoke through the difficulty that women still have, even though we're in 2025, which was meant to be 2020 thrive, but I'm not sure what's the thriving part yet. I haven't experienced that yet, but I don't know about you guys. But moving ahead, if we want the steel industry to bounce back, and we know we're navigating this sometimes minus government, will gender play a role in that? If we embrace somebody for their skill set, that would push us forward, right?
Definitely.
Hey, Caireen,
Yeah, definitely.
what's your perspective on the future of the industry?
So I remain positive, but I think that what Shrey and the SAEFA team were doing, there is massive room for such an explosion of input into educating, uplifting, and finding the right people for the industry. And I think if we united together and had a platform where we used our voice to have an influence. For example, ITAC launching the new tariffs on steel imports that, you know, now that we need to be more vocal. And I think people are scared to have to voice out. You know, I was petrified about today's seminar. You're scared to voice your opinion because of, you know, you don't want to offend anybody. You're not too sure if anybody's going to relate. But I think there is such an opportunity for us to really, really make a difference. There is.
Yeah, Shrey's raised her hand. Shrey, do you want to join the conversation with us? Gordon, I don't know if Shrey can unmute.
Can everybody hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. And I just absolutely love this topic. And I love that you have Caireen in here because we've discussed so much of this. And I think at the end of the discussion, I was like I feed off her passion for it. It just gets me so excited. And there's just listening to the conversation, Brad, a few things that I wanted to touch on. And I come from an industrial psychology background, so also to talk about some psychological principles that may be at play. So an interesting thing, my cousin is the vice president of innovation for Coca-Cola Global. She was the youngest global director for Coca-Cola, and she was recently in South Africa, and we were having a discussion, and I asked her, you know, what is your recipe for success? You're a young Indian South African female leading with a marketing background, leading a team of engineers in America. She's a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority. Yeah. And she's doing so well. And I asked her, like, how do you get it right? And she said, the core that she's had to learn as she's moved from country to country, the foundation for successful leadership is the principle of psychological safety. And psychological safety is I'm able to challenge my leader's thinking. I'm able to ask questions without fear of consequence. Now, we spoke about the male ego and female feistiness and all of this stuff. But the interesting thing about it is one of the big causes of not having psychological safety is groupthink. When we have so many people who are like-minded from similar backgrounds in a room, you tend to get people who are agreeing with each other constantly, which then creates a culture and an environment where you can't challenge the status quo. And this is where diversity becomes so important, because you break that group think. You start to have people that come in with different perspectives and different ideas, and you can become more creative in your problem solving because you have people from different backgrounds. And when you have those people from the different backgrounds who start to challenge the status quo, we remove groupthink, we create psychological safety, and that male ego that we talk about is no longer there, because it's not about ego, it's about dictatorship. It's about whatever I say is right, which isn't the right way. And we can reduce that through improving diversity.
Diversity, yeah.
So we don't think about it when we ask leaders, why is this important? Guys, this is why it is important, because you're not going to have people challenging the status quo if you have if everybody in the room looks like you, comes from the same background as you, and thinks the way that you do. So yeah, psychological safety, groupthink, diversity, it's so important. And just out of interest, I'm actually in my 2nd month of my notice period at my current company, and we're looking for my replacement. And it's been a very interesting process because everybody has different ideas of what's needed to replace me. And eventually we called in these people to do a gap analysis, and we got the whole leadership team in together to say, well, what is the recipe? Why are you so worried? Because there's plenty of people who can do HR. So what is it that's making you concerned? And the team said, well, when we're all fighting, she walks in and she calms us down. Now, the interesting thing about that is a typically feminine trait, not a typically masculine trait. A typically feminine trait that would often in the workplace be considered a weakness. Yet this is what the team is worried about losing.
Yeah.
This is what they're worried about losing. And it's almost like we think that this is my superpower. And I'm saying, guys, this is not a superpower. What this tells me is we don't have enough of a female presence in this workplace. If you are so worried about losing that it becomes a superpower, we don't have enough of those feminine traits where everybody is fighting and someone can come in and say, let's calm down.
Sure. Shrey, thank you so much. That was really amazing. I really appreciate it. I think, at the end of the day, this is a difficult situation because we're dealing with human beings. And, if you just go to Wimpy and you sit at Wimpy on a Saturday morning and you watch a couple of people, you'll realize that we are an odd bunch of people. And we do weird stuff, and we are all independent thinkers. But just swinging back to closing, because we're nearly done, I want to ask Caireen just a question around, the day-to-day, what are the small steps? I mean, it sounds intimidating for someone sitting in the room that maybe doesn't have the experience that Shrey has, or that backing, or the insight that Gordon might carry, or yourself for being in the industry for so long. What can I do on a day-to-day basis to get me closer to a better policy, and also to get me closer to shifting my mindset away from what I think a workplace should look like, and what my workplace should actually really look like?
So obviously, to make a great decision, you have to be well informed. So for somebody to find out, to look, to read, to ask, ask people that in business or industry. But yeah, it's, long-term value is created by those who through the world's discord find and harness opportunities. Got to grab those opportunities, grab the opportunity to go and learn about different policies, find out, read, chat to people. You've got to start to use your network so that you can start to develop policy. But I don't think it's about doing it in depth or in detail. This, the simpler, the better, the easier to understand, that kind of thing. It is a minefield, but to just break it down and have your things that are important to you, and focus on those kind of things. But I suppose a problem shared is a problem halved, and a problem broken down is solved a lot easier, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and now, sorry, Brad, I've forgotten the second question.
No, it's all good. I see Shrey's raised her hand again. So Shrey, would you mind just unmuting and just giving us your feedback?
Sorry, Caireen and Brad. I just loved what Caireen said there about simplify. So we all know that we have this Employment Equity Committee, and this committee sits and they do analysis and they start talking about barriers. And that committee should represent every occupational level, every race, and every gender within the organization. And so you need to be able to simplify, because even your unskilled labor needs to be able to understand what you're talking about. And the interesting thing is, I always say there should be somebody to facilitate that process with your committee. Because when I've sat in, they often touch on these surface level things. And it's, guys, are you getting to the root cause of your barrier? Ask more questions, ask more questions, ask more questions. And once we start getting to that root cause and simplifying it where everybody within the organization can understand, is when we can really start to make a difference and drive diversity and equity.
Yeah, just ask loads of questions. Be that person, you know, that annoying person that questions everything, like a little bit of a Sheldon. I think we all need a bit of a Sheldon in our lives, right? But in closing, I think from what I've personally taken, I've learned a lot in this session. Thank you very much. I've learned that, you know, I should just show up every day with authenticity. I think that's really important for me. I know that I'm human and I make lots of mistakes, but if I show up every day with the right intent and the right policy in place, I can make a difference. And I do think it does affect productivity within the individual if they feel like they're being supported and nurtured and cared for, and they believe they're in that position not because of race or because of gender, but because they have some sort of greatness that we as leaders are trying to unpack and to get them to show in the workplace. I think one of the things that kind of keeps me sane in a very insane world is that you never know who's going to come into your business tomorrow. It might be something and someone just so absolutely amazing, but if you're judging that person based on what they're showing up like, and it's so weird because when we were kids, we were told, you know, you've got 2 seconds to impress. But if you look at our kids and the generation coming up, if we applied that same theory, we would be judging until church on Sunday. So the generations are changing and they're not showing up in such a judgmental space. But as us slightly older ones who are now the leaders, we are showing up with that theory. So sometimes we've got to, as leaders, step away from the policy creation and actually get other people to step in that we believe can create a policy that can push our businesses forward. But Gordon, what are you thinking, brother? A few minutes. Did you feel this was impactful? What's going on in that beautiful mind of yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, like everybody said, you know, I think it's I agree wholeheartedly with everybody's comments and input. You know, I just think from in terms of sort of a takeaway maybe, and sort of some comments in parting, just in anticipation of today's session and doing some kind of thinking and research around personal brand, in particular, you know, we're always building that personal brand. It's an ongoing thing. It's not like, you know, it's something that we create. You know, I always go back to this tick box thing, you know, and once it's done, it's done. It's an ongoing thing. So, you know, an individual's personal brand, particularly in the workplace, affects opportunities. You know, those who are seen as fair, as inclusive, will always build confidence, build trust and influence. But we need to, as leaders, be mindful that employees also build personal brands, you know, and that's why those who speak up, those who collaborate well, those who respect others, those who, you know, yes, kind of are team players, build credibility and upward mobility. So, you know, for the up and comers, that's what I would encourage. You know, don't be scared, as you said, Brad, to get involved, but do so with an open mind. But just be mindful as both, you know, up and comers and maybe as leaders in terms of the risks that if whoever, whether it's a leader or whether it's an up and comer, if you build a brand around exclusionary or disrespectful behavior, that's going to erode trust in a business. And trust is everything to a business. Everything. It's it's the basis of the employment relationship. And that can damage both individual and company reputation. So, it's very, very important that we're just mindful of one another's perspectives and influence and that type of thing, and that we approach it accordingly. And then I think that's a really good starting point, and we can get to know each other properly and genuinely and authentically much quicker that way.
Yeah, because there's an individual behind that skin color or that gender. There's someone with greatness, and it's our roles as leaders is to find out where that greatness sits and how do we pull that out of that person, kicking and screaming sometimes. So,
but I think, Brad, that's also why it's so important, sorry to interject there, with what Gordon said, is with all that in mind, that end goal is what keeps you all on the track where that argumentative or the, whatever your difference of opinion in that is so important, is to say we're allowed to have that, because our end goal is to achieve inclusivity. Our end goal is this, and to keep that end goal in front of you all the time helps you stop veering off the road, having that personal disagreement or not understanding, what it is that the person's saying, etc., etc.
Perfect. And for someone who was a bit nervous for the session, I feel like you did flipping well. I'm so damn impressed.
Thanks, Brad.
Are you feeling relieved? Like, phew, I need to go for a Jack Daniels or something. Oh, you asked for that bottle of whiskey from Gordon. What whiskey do you drink?
Brandy.
Oh, brandy. You asked for brandy. Hey, woo. Where are you from? The East Rand? Doesn't matter. Oh, my word. No way.
But, I wanted to just say in closing, I think that people need to understand that the conversations that we have here matter. They shape public sentiment, they inform policy, they influence the future, and I think we need to recognize that economic prosperity rests on achieving social stability. And social stability in your workplace includes these things that we've discussed today. So, we've all got work to do and we've all have minimal time. But I think the success of our business depends on the courage of the change maker. And we need to align with those who are building, questioning, and leading. That alignment is vital. That call to action from our greatest South African guide us. It seems impossible until it's done. Nelson Mandela knew about persevering through hardship in ways great and small. It's our duty to do so as well.
Yeah, my biggest lesson, patience. The patience of Job. Lord, can I learn that already? Because it's getting late in life, but we're all on these lesson journeys. So guys, I'd like to thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Gordon, I'm going to hand back to you. And again, Caireen, thank you so much. I hope I didn't slaughter your name and I got it right. But thank you very much for your time. You were an amazing, amazing guest. I really appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Gordon.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Caireen. Thanks, Brad. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us. Hope you found it as insightful as certainly I did. Great discussion, as Brad said. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a blessed rest of the week. And thanks very much once again for joining us.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye, everyone.